October pasture-beaten brass gold. Elijah Harrow cut the engine on the John Deere his father bought in '72. He stepped down from the cab, his broad brown hands brushing the wheel once, before letting go the same way his father had, and his father before that. 3 black Range Rovers stopped on the far side of the fence. A woman stepped out and looked straight at him. "Hey, Flannel, you the help out here." Elijah did not turn around.
Hey, Flannel, you need help out here?
Listen carefully. That rust bucket of yours is trespassing on my future parking lot. Ride it home to whatever trailer you crawled out of and tell your boss the grown-ups are here now. 5 seconds of silence. In Dallas, Garrett Cole signed the survey order on Copper Springs. The next morning was bright and cold, the kind of Texas autumn that smells like dry mesquite and wood smoke. The dusty Spur Diner sat on the corner of Main and Pecan in Stone Creek, its windows fogged from the griddle and its booths half full of men in feed caps. A bell rang over the door. Diane Voss walked in with the air of someone who had never in her life been told to wait for a table. She took the booth by the window, set down a paper cup of Cabrivan coffee, and opened her laptop. The county appraiser was already late. She did not seem to care. Her phone rang and she answered before the second ring. Closing Silver Mesa inside 90 days. Yes, I have it on calendar. Her voice was Dallas warm and Dallas impatient at once. The kind of voice trained to take up the whole room. Tell Boyd if he wants the easement language tightened, he can fly down himself. At the far end of this counter, a man in a flannel shirt was cutting pancakes for a small girl with a brown braid. He did not look up. He did not need to. He recognized the voice. The second call came in 3 minutes later. Garrett Cole. Elijah could hear the chairman's voice faintly leaking from the receiver. Low and silken. The neighboring parcel matters. Diane. Talk to the holdout. Charm him if you must. Offer 8 figures if it gets us moving. We need that water easement clean before the bond rating comes through. Diane rolled her eyes at her own coffee. Garrett, it's a hick with a tractor. He'll sign for $2 million in a handshake. I'll have it on your desk by Friday. Ruby looked up from her pancakes. Daddy, why is that lady talk so loud? Elijah kept his eyes on the plate. He cut another piece of pancake into a smaller piece. Some people use loud to cover small, sweetheart. Diane ended the call. She stretched her shoulders, glanced around the diner, and her eyes caught his. A flicker. 1 second of recognition. Her mouth did not change shape, but the tips of her ears went the faintest shade of pink. She stood up. She walked over. She stopped beside his booth as though she had simply decided to. Mr. Elijah did not offer the name. He took a sip of coffee and looked at her over the rim of the cup. Diane pivoted into her professional smile, the one she had paid a coach in Dallas $8,000 to perfect. I'd like to discuss your property line at some point. Convenient for you. Elijah set the cup down. Property line's been there since 1887. Ma'am hasn't moved. She placed a card on the table. Cream stock, dark blue ink, no graphic. She walked out without looking back. Ruby reached over, picked up the card, turned it upside down, and squinted at it as if she might learn something from the wrong side. Elijah slid it into the pocket of his flannel without reading it. That night, he stood on the cedar porch of the white frame house, watching the surveyor's headlights sweep slow patterns through the pasture beyond the creek. A single light from the Silver Mesa side, then 2, then 4. At 8 the next morning, Sandra Reyes picked up her office phone in her 2-room law office above the Stone Creek hardware store. Diane was on the line and already mid-sentence. I need a list of holdout landowners adjacent to Silver Mesa. Anyone whose signature might be required for easement adjustment. I want it within the hour. Sandra reached for her notepad with one hand and her coffee with the other. She gave 3 names. She spoke slowly each one. None of them was Elijah Harrow. What about the parcel to the east of Silver Mesa? Diane pressed. The one with the old white house and the John Deere. I drove past it yesterday. Who owns that? Sandra set the coffee down. That parcel is privately held. Owner doesn't take meetings. She hung up before Diane could push. Then she sat at her desk for a full minute staring at the wall. After that, she opened the bottom drawer of her file cabinet. Inside, behind a row of plain manila, sat a leather binder. Harrow Cattle Company. Deed History 1887 present. She put her hand flat on the cover. She did not open it. She drew her hand back. 3 miles east behind the horse barn. Elijah climbed the wooden stairs to a loft he had built himself the spring after Naomi died. The walls were lined with what looked at a glance like a normal rancher's keepsakes. They were not. A framed bachelor's degree in agricultural economics from Texas A&M Dean's List. A black and white photograph of his great-grandfather, a broad-shouldered black man in a Sunday suit, receiving a deed from a Texas land office clerk in 1887. Land earned in a time and a state that did not part with it easily for men who looked like him. And a current hydrology survey color-coded by aquifer zone with Copper Springs marked at its center. The blue line of the flow ran east across Harrow Cattle Company land before it reached anywhere else. 14,000 acres of Silver Mesa depended on water that could not be legally moved without his signature. Without Elijah's name on a single page, not one drop crossed the fence. He picked up the phone and called Caldwell and Boyd Austin. Theo, pull the easement files. Every page Voss Meridian has filed on the Silver Mesa deal in the last 6 months. Today. That afternoon, Diane came up the long gravel drive of Harrow in her Range Rover. She brought a bottle of Napa Cabernet that had cost her $400 in a Dallas wine shop, and she carried it with both hands. Elijah met her on the porch. He took the bottle, set it on the kitchen counter, then poured her a glass of well water from the pitcher in the icebox. Water here's older than the wine. Ma'am, try it first. She drank. Her face shifted. Clean, faintly mineral sweet on the back of the tongue. Where does this come from, Copper Springs? 3 miles that way. Been running since before the state of Texas existed. A door creaked. Ruby came in, leading Biscuit, the old Palomino mare, by the halter. She stopped when she saw the woman in the kitchen. Diane, who had never knelt to a child in her life, set the glass down and lowered herself onto one knee. Hi, I'm Diane. Who's your friend? This is Biscuit. She's old. So am I. Sometimes. Elijah watched. He did not speak. When Diane left, she paused at the open door of the Range Rover. Mr. Harrow, what would it take for you to sign an easement? To know what you do with the water? He went back inside. The door closed. That night, the file from Austin arrived by courier in a sealed accordion folder. Elijah carried it up to the loft and turned the pages slowly one at a time until he reached the one Theo had marked with a yellow tab. A scanned internal memo dated September 14th. The signature at the bottom was Garrett Cole's. The subject was the engineered diversion of Copper Springs flow toward an Austin metropolitan water contract. A contract that by the third page was worth $400 million over 15 years and would draw the spring dry inside 7. Elijah folded the memo. He looked at the clock on the wall. He spoke softly to no one. Naomi would have burned this place down before letting him have it. At 6 o'clock in this morning, the surveyors crossed the fence. Elijah was already up. He had been up since 4:30, the way he had been since Naomi died, sitting on the porch with a cup of black coffee, while the sky behind the live oaks went from charcoal to peach. He saw the first white flag go in on his side of the property line, then the second. He set the coffee down. He walked out calm and unhurried, his boots stirring up small puffs of caliche dust. He stopped 20 feet from the survey foreman. Gentlemen, you're on Harrow land. I'll need you to pack up and step back across that fence. The foreman called Diane. She arrived in 20 minutes flat. Blazer over a silk shell new cowboy boots that had not yet learned the shape of her foot. Mr. Harrow, my crew has authorization from Silver Mesa's cellar. If your fence line is in dispute, I suggest you take it up with the county. Elijah said nothing for a beat. Then he took out his phone and dialed. Sheriff Bender Elijah Harrow. I've got 6 men on my property, and I'd appreciate a deputy when you've got the time. Sheriff Tom Bender pulled up in 12 minutes in a county cruiser the color of dried mud. He stepped out, settled his hat, and walked straight past Diane to where Elijah was standing. "Morning, Mr. Harrow, sir. What have we got?" Diane noted the "sir." She filed it. In a county like this one, with a history like this, states a white lawman crossing a yard to address a black man as "sir" without hesitation, without theater, was not nothing. It was the kind of word earned slowly over years in a place that does not hand it freely. Elijah had not asked for it. He had simply been for long enough a man worth addressing correctly. The sheriff turned to the surveyors. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Within 10 minutes, the crew had pulled their flags, loaded their equipment into 2 pickup trucks, and rolled back across the fence onto Silver Mesa land. Diane stood in the middle of the dirt in a blazer that suddenly felt like the wrong piece of armor for the country she was standing on. After they left, she did not get back in her car. She walked over to the fence. She put both hands flat on the top rail. Elijah joined her. Slow. "Why does the sheriff call you sir? Because his mother was my 3rd grade teacher. That's how it works out here." Diane did not answer. From the porch, Ruby waved at her. A small hand, a small smile. Diane waved back before she thought about it. She drove back to the motel in Stone Creek in silence. In room 12, she opened her laptop and for the first time typed the words herself into the county database. Harrow Cattle Company, Red Mesa County, acreage 14,237. Last appraisal, $118,400,000. Sole owner Elijah A. Harrow. She read the screen 3 times. The words from the first afternoon future parking lot repeated themselves in her own voice in her own head, and she did not like the sound of them. Her phone rang. Garrett Cole. She let it go. She let it ring out. She turned the phone face down on the bedspread. Most of us carry scripts we didn't write. The words we reach for when we want to dismiss someone, the voice we use when we want to win a room, we picked those up somewhere from someone before we ever knew we were learning. They feel like ours. They often aren't. The moment we hear ourselves and don't like what we're saying is a small door opening. It's worth walking through. That same evening, Sandra drove up the long gravel road to Harrow with the leather binder under her arm. She and Elijah sat on the porch in the blue light. She set the binder on the table between them. Elijah Cole's already filed paperwork through a shell entity to claim adverse easement against the Eastern Flow Channel. He's not going to ask you nicely. He's going to try to take it through the courts and the legislature both. Elijah poured 2 fingers of whiskey into each of 2 glasses. He did not say anything. "And he's holding something over my son," Sandra said. "Daniel just made associate at a firm in Dallas. Cole sits on their advisory board. I can't be your lawyer of record on this one, Elijah. I'm sorry." Elijah nodded once. "You don't need to be. You just needed to come tell me. That's enough." 3 days later, Diane came back to Harrow a 3rd time. She did not bring a bottle. She did not bring a tri-folded contract or a tablet or an assistant. She carried instead a manila folder she had spent the previous evening reading line by line in her motel room her own company's draft of the Silver Mesa purchase agreement, the version with her signature on page 41. She had read it twice in the airport before she signed it 3 months ago. Last night she had read it slowly, the way Naomi used to read seed catalogs, and she had found on page 28 the clause that quietly granted Voss Meridian the right to redirect surface flow from Copper Springs. After closing, she had signed it. She had not understood what she was signing. Elijah was at the kitchen table when she came in. He poured a cup of coffee for her without asking. "If I told you the deal is written to dry up your land within 5 years," she said, "would you believe me?" Elijah slid the cup toward her. "I'd believe you were starting to see it." She sat down. She set her purse on the floor. She did not open the laptop she was not carrying. Ruby padded in barefoot from the front room with a sugar cookie wrapped in a napkin and held it out. Diane took it in both hands like it was something that might break. "Thank you, Ruby." "You're welcome, Miss Diane." After the coffee, Elijah did something he had not done with another adult in 4 years. He stood up, took down a barn jacket from the peg by the door and held the door for her. "Come on, I want to show you something." They walked the long way around the south pasture, past the windmill that still pumped though no one needed it to, past the pecan grove Naomi had planted the year Ruby was born. At the top of the rise behind the barn, beneath a single live oak older than any deed, was a piece of granite the size of a saddle, low and gray. No inscription except a name and 2 dates. A clay pot of bluebonnet seedlings sat at its foot. "My wife knew this land better than I do," Elijah said. "She used to say land doesn't belong to anyone, Elijah. People belong to land. Cole doesn't understand that. I don't think you did either until this week." Diane looked down at the grass. She did not try to answer for a long moment. "I was raised in a high-rise, Mr. Harrow. My father sold leverage. He went broke twice. He taught me land was just a slow stock, and now I'm not sure what I was taught was right." They walked back together in silence. At the side of the barn, Ruby was brushing Biscuit's flank with both hands, talking to the mare in a soft running stream of nonsense. Diane stopped at the fence and watched. Elijah stopped behind her and watched her watch his daughter. The distance between them, measured in steps in air, in years of being 2 different kinds of persons, shortened by 1. Neither of them spoke. Neither of them moved away. The Voss Meridian boardroom in Dallas was on the 43rd floor, all glass and oiled walnut, with a view of downtown that had once made Diane feel she had arrived. That morning, sitting in her usual seat at Garrett Cole's right hand, the view looked smaller than she remembered. Garrett opened the meeting by announcing a compressed timeline, 30 days to close Silver Mesa instead of 90. He wanted the spring diversion application filed with the Texas Water Development Board before, and he smiled when he said it. Any noisy neighbors got litigious. Diane kept her face still. "Garrett, the easement isn't clean. The Harrow parcel controls upstream flow. We need their signature or the deal collapses in due diligence." Garrett's smile did not waver. "Diane Harrow is a sentimental man with a child and a dead wife. He'll sign for the right number. And if he doesn't, we have other ways." He stood. He walked around the table. As he passed her chair, he laid a hand briefly on her shoulder. "The grown-ups are handling it now." Diane did not move. She knew that sentence. She had used it. She had used it in this very boardroom on a junior analyst 8 months ago. She had used it to a contractor in Stone Creek only 3 days prior. She had used it because Garrett had used it on her 4 years ago in her first week on the job, and she had absorbed it the way a child absorbs the cadence of a parent's contempt. She sat very still until the rest of the meeting was over. Then she walked to the women's room on the 43rd floor and stood in front of the mirror for a long time without turning the water on. She took her phone out. She dialed Miss Reyes. "Off the record, what kind of man is Elijah Harrow?" There was a pause of exactly 3 seconds. "The kind you don't try to fool twice." Diane put the phone back in her bag. That night, she drove south. She did not call her assistant. She did not pack a bag. She drove 3 hours in the dark, the Dallas tower lights falling away behind her, and she pulled up at the gate of Harrow Cattle Company at 1 o'clock in the morning. Elijah was still awake. He had been in the tack room repairing the cinch on Ruby's saddle for the morning ride. He saw the headlights through the kitchen window. He walked out, opened the gate, and waited. She got out of the car. She left her keys in the ignition. "I'm not here as a buyer, Mr. Harrow." He looked at her for a long second. Then he opened the gate wider. "Then come in, Miss Voss." As she stepped onto the gravel of the drive, her phone vibrated in her hand. Unknown number. She glanced down. It was a photograph. A young man in a graduation cap and gown. The Texas A&M Law School logo behind him. Beneath the image, 6 words. "Ask your friend Reyes to stay out of this. GC." She read it. Her hand closed around the phone. She did not show Elijah. She did not need to. He saw the change in her face, and he did not ask. He only tipped his head toward the porch. They sat there until the sky went gray. In the morning, they drove together to Stone Creek Feed and tacked the long, low building on the south edge of town with a wooden bin of bulk oats by the door and a hand-lettered sign that read, "No credit. No exceptions." Sorry, Grandma. Hollis Vance had owned the store for 46 years. He was 78, lean as a fence post, and had not missed a workday since his wife's funeral in 2004. He looked up when the bell jangled. He grinned at Elijah. He looked past Elijah at Diane, slow and assessing, the way a horse trader looks at an unfamiliar mare. This, the Dallas lady I've been hearing about. That's her, Elijah said. Hollis wiped his hands on the apron at his waist. He spoke directly to Diane now. No edge in it, but no soft cushion either. Miss, your chairman came through here in 19. Same shoes, different face. Tried to buy out your boy Elijah. Elijah said no. Cole said he'd find another way. Diane did not flinch. She held his eyes. Mr. Vance, do you know what kind of way he meant? Hollis smiled very slightly and gestured for them to follow him into the back room. The back room of Stone Creek Feed and Tack smelled of leather oil and old paper. Hollis crossed to a tall green safe that had been bought used from a defunct bank in San Saba in 1961. He spun the dial. He opened the door. He reached past a stack of sale records and pulled out a brown envelope, soft at the corners. Inside was a photocopy of a meeting transcript dated June 11, 2019. The parties were Garrett Cole, then a senior partner at a Dallas land acquisition firm, and the deputy commissioner of the Texas General Land Office. The subject was a contingency plan to be activated only if the Harrow parcel could not be acquired through private negotiation to pursue an eminent domain taking on behalf of a public-private water infrastructure consortium. The transcript carried both signatures, the date stamp, and the small embossed seal of the deputy commissioner's office. The original had vanished from the state archive in 2020. This was the only copy. My nephew worked in that office, Hollis said. Made a copy of the file before they cleaned the cabinet. He passed away the year after, but he left it to me. I've been waiting 7 years to give this to somebody who'd use it right. He handed the envelope to Elijah. Elijah handed it to Diane. Her fingers closed around it. They trembled faintly before she steadied them. This was enough. With Diane's testimony as corroboration, this was enough to void the Silver Mesa purchase, dissolve Garrett Cole from the board, and open a federal conspiracy investigation that would last years. On the drive back to Harrow, Diane did not speak. Elijah drove the 1998 Ford F-250 with one wrist on the wheel. At the second cattle guard, he eased the truck to a stop. He let the engine idle. Miss Voss, you can give that paper back to Hollis right now and pretend you never saw it. Drive back to Dallas. Sign the deal. Nobody would blame you. She looked down at the envelope on her lap. She did not look up. I'd blame me. Elijah nodded one time. He put the truck back in gear. Then we go to Austin Monday. It was the first time in 3 weeks of conversations that he had used the word we. Diane registered it. She did not remark on it. She turned her face to the side window where the live oaks ran past in long, uneven rows, and she watched them without seeing them. When they pulled into the Harrow Drive, Ruby came running from the barn in her small boots, braids swinging. She did not slow down. She wrapped her arms around Diane's waist in a single short, complete hug and let go before Diane had time to react. "You're back." "I'm back," Diane said, and her voice was not the voice she used on the 43rd floor. Elijah watched from the porch. He slid his hands into the pockets of his flannel and stayed there a long moment before he stepped down to meet them. Monday morning was cold and clear. Elijah drove the Ford F-250 south on Highway 281 with Diane in the passenger seat, the brown envelope and a thicker manila folder of her own materials in a leather briefcase wedged between them. Ruby was at the Reyes house in Stone Creek where Sandra had promised pancakes, fairy tales, and a slow morning brushing the neighbor's pony. Somewhere south of Marble Falls, they began to talk. They had spent 20 days within a few miles of each other, and they had not yet really spoken. "My father went broke twice," Diane said, looking at the river running parallel to the road. "Once when I was 9 and once when I was 15. He raised me on a phrase, 'Never love anything that can't appreciate in value.' He meant it as kindness." Elijah did not look away from the road. My wife wrote her senior thesis on Copper Springs Range ecology fall semester 92. That was how we met. I was a junior. She was a senior. She asked me if I knew anything about my own water, and I said no. And she said, well, that's a shame. And I said, maybe you could teach me. Diane smiled at the windshield. She'd have liked you, Elijah said. Not at first, but eventually. It was the first smile of the trip that did not have anything to sell. They reached Austin a little past noon. Theo Caldwell was waiting in his corner office on the 18th floor of a stone-faced building 2 blocks off Congress Avenue. His sleeves already rolled. He read the Hollis envelope without speaking. 90 seconds passed. He set it down on the blotter. Elijah, this is enough. This is more than enough. We file Wednesday. Diane cleared her throat. Mr. Caldwell, if I voluntarily resign from Voss Meridian and turn over internal documents as a cooperating witness, can we file Tuesday morning? Theo looked at Elijah. Elijah looked at Diane. Diane looked at the bookshelf behind Theo's head and did not turn away. Tuesday morning, Theo said. That night, they took separate rooms on the 8th floor of a hotel on West 6th Street. At 10 o'clock, Elijah knocked on the door of room 812. When Diane opened it, he held out a glass bottle of water, a green glass quart, hand-corked. Condensation already on the outside. Helps you sleep. Naomi used to swear by it. She took it. She held it in both hands. Why are you doing this with me, Elijah? You could have done it without me. Elijah thought about it. Because you turned around. Most people don't. He closed the door. Turning around is harder than it sounds. Most people see the moment they should and keep going anyway. Because stopping costs something and the new direction is less certain than the old one. That is exactly what makes the people who do turn around worth paying attention to. She stood in the middle of the room with the bottle in her hands for nearly a minute. Then she poured a glass. She drank it slowly, sitting on the edge of the bed, and she did not check her phone, and she did not open her laptop. When the glass was empty, she lay down on top of the comforter fully dressed and slept for the first time in 3 nights. In Dallas, Garrett Cole was on his 4th call to her phone. None of them was answered. He turned to the security director on the other end of the line. Find her. At 7 a.m. Tuesday, Diane knocked on the door of room 810. She was wearing the same blazer as the day before. She held the empty water bottle by the neck. I'm ready. Courage rarely announces itself. More often, it arrives as a small, quiet decision made before the day has fully started. A door knocked on a bottle held by the neck, 2 words spoken into a hallway. Those small decisions carry weight. Don't underestimate them in yourself and don't overlook them in others. The clerk's office of the Travis County Civil District Court opened at 9 o'clock. Theo Caldwell was the first attorney through the door. He filed 3 documents simultaneously. The first was a civil complaint on behalf of Elijah A. Harrow and Harrow Cattle Company against Voss Meridian Land Holdings, the chairman of its board, Garrett Cole, individually, and a list of 17 co-defendants alleging conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted abuse of eminent domain proceedings, and willful violation of Texas surface and groundwater law. The second was Diane Voss's sworn affidavit as a cooperating witness. The third was a sealed packet of internal Voss Meridian emails proving Garrett Cole had personally drafted the buried diversion clause, knowing what it would do. The filings were public by 10. By noon, the Dallas business press had it. By 1, Voss Meridian had lost 41% of its market capitalization. The board convened an emergency session at 2 o'clock. They voted 7-1 to remove Garrett Cole effective immediately. Garrett cast the one dissenting vote against himself. At 4 o'clock, the Dallas field office of the FBI opened a formal fraud and conspiracy file. Elijah and Diane walked out of the courthouse together. They did not hold hands. They crossed Congress Avenue in the slanted afternoon light and walked 4 blocks to a small coffee shop with a tin ceiling. They sat at a table by the window. Diane placed her hand flat on the wood. Elijah placed his hand 5 centimeters away from hers. Neither hand moved. "What happens to you now?" Elijah asked. I don't know. The board may keep me. They may not. Either way, I'm not going back to that office the same person. Elijah looked at the street. There's room at Harrow if you need to think for a while. Spare cabin's been empty since Naomi's sister moved out. She turned her face toward him. Elijah, that's not nothing. What you just said. I know. On the long drive back to Stone Creek, her phone rang. It was a number she recognized, the board's outside counsel. She put it on speaker low and listened. They were offering her the interim chairman seat. They were doubling her base. They were asking her to take Voss Meridian through the cleanup and out the other side. I'll think about it, she said. She ended the call. Elijah glanced sideways at her. You're considering it. She looked out at the dark line of the hill country to the west. I'm considering whether I want to spend the next 10 years undoing what Garrett built or whether I want to do something I haven't done yet. Elijah did not ask her what that something was. He did not need to. He kept driving. For 2 weeks, Diane stayed in the cabin behind the main house at Harrow. The cabin was small, one room and a stove, a tin roof Naomi's sister had repainted green in 2020. A porch with 2 cane-bottom chairs. Diane wore jeans she had bought at the feed store. The cowboy boots Elijah had quietly placed by the door her second morning had real mud on them by the end of the first week. She drank coffee on the main house porch every morning with Elijah and Ruby. On a Thursday, Ruby decided to teach her how to tie a real cowboy knot. The kind that holds a halter rope to a fence post and pulls free with one tug. 2 loops Miss Diane through the back like a real knot, not a city knot. Diane laughed a clear, open laugh she did not remember making before. Her head tipped back against the porch post. Elijah watched from the kitchen window with his coffee, and he did not look away. She formally declined the chairman's seat the second Monday. In its place, she announced the founding of the Voss Meridian Land Trust, a non-profit conservation foundation chartered under Texas law for the purpose of protecting family ranches from corporate acquisition and aquifer-draining development. Initial capital $40 million drawn from her whistleblower award, her personal savings, and the liquidation of her Dallas penthouse. The grand jury indicted Garrett Cole on the 23rd of October for federal counts. He was remanded to home confinement pending trial. His Silver Mesa shell entity collapsed inside a week. Hollis Vance was called as a witness. He wore his old Stetson and a tie his late wife had picked out for him 40 years before. He answered questions in short, plain sentences. When he stepped down from the stand, Elijah was waiting for him in the hallway. Hollis put a hand on Elijah's shoulder. Naomi would have been proud. Son. Elijah nodded. He could not get any words out. Sandra Reyes, her son Daniel, now safely employed as an associate at Caldwell and Boyd in Austin, out of Cole's reach forever, finally opened the leather binder she had kept in the bottom drawer of her file cabinet for 7 years. Inside, behind the deed, history was a single folded sheet of cream stationery. Naomi's handwriting. A letter written 6 months before the accident. Sandra drove out to Harrow on a Friday evening and put it in Elijah's hands. He sat down at the kitchen table to read it. There was a line in it he had never seen. If I'm not there, Elijah finds someone who can stand on this land without trying to own it. Elijah read it twice. He folded it. He put it in the pocket of his flannel shirt. He walked out onto the porch. Diane was sitting on the top step with Ruby beside her, teaching her how to find the first stars of December. By the first week of December, Silver Mesa had been acquired by the Voss Meridian Land Trust for $89 million, well below the sale price Garrett had once chased, but enough to satisfy the seller's note and the lender. The land was placed under a perpetual conservation easement. Copper Springs received state-level protective designation. No diversion would ever be drilled. The Austin Metropolitan Water contract was reassigned to a desalination project on the coast, where it should have been from the beginning. Diane moved out of the cedar cabin the second week of December and into a small rented house on the south end of Stone Creek, close to Harrow, but not on it. The house had a yellow door and a porch that faced east, and she liked it. She was not ready yet for what lay between the cabin and the main house. Elijah understood. He did not ask. When she came over for supper on Wednesdays, he simply set a third plate. On a clear afternoon, a few days before Christmas, Elijah walked the fence line between Harrow and Silver Mesa with a coil of new wire over one shoulder and a fence post driver in his hand. The sky was the high, cold blue that only comes in Texas in December. It was the same stretch of fence where Diane had stood 3 months earlier in her city heels and her tailored blazer and called his pasture her future parking lot. She came down the dirt road on foot in her boots, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee from the dusty spur. She handed him one. They worked without speaking for almost an hour. She held the wire taut against the cedar posts while he drove them deeper into the caliche. Her hands had calluses, now small ones, on the fleshy part of her thumbs from the work of the last 2 weeks. When the last post was set, they straightened up together and looked west across the pasture toward the rise where Copper Springs ran cold and clear and older than the state of Texas. "Elijah," she said, "I don't know what this is yet." He set the driver down. He looked at her for a long moment. "It doesn't have to be anything yet. Land doesn't rush." She nodded once. She did not look away. A small thudding of boots came up behind them. Ruby was leading Biscuit by the halter, her braids swinging her cheeks pink from the cold. She walked straight between them, slipped her right hand into Diane's left, slipped her left hand into Elijah's right, and turned the 3 of them gently to face the spring. The water was still moving. It had always been moving. It would keep moving long after all 3 of them, and after the fence, and after the wire, and after whatever names anyone wrote on any deed. Elijah felt his daughter's small fingers tight around his own. He felt on Ruby's other side the woman who had stood on this same line in September and tried to take it from him, now standing on it with him in the same boots, in the same cold, looking at the same water. He did not let go. Neither did Diane. Some fences mark where land ends, others mark where it begins. Notice what you hold on to, not what you accumulate, what you actually hold and refuse to let go of. The water, the child, the people willing to stand beside you in the cold and do the work alongside you. Those are the things that last. Take good care of them.